Paranormal experiences don't really work to a timescale, and therefore, for the spooky season, and indeed for the whole of season 13, we invite you to listen to a dark minisode. Hi everyone, and welcome back to a dark minisode. We like to think of these episodes as little teasers in between the main episodes of the Dark Paranormal. And of course, we have episode 8 coming on Friday. And talk about time flying, that means the following week will be the penultimate episode of season 13. Therefore, if you have a true paranormal experience that you believe would fit the Dark Paranormal, email it in for season 14. The email address, as ever, is contact@thedarkparanormal.com, or you can visit our website, thedarkparanormal.com, and click the Contact Us link. But let's jump right into our first experience on today's Dark Minisode. And it comes in from Ashley, who writes, "My family has always believed in the paranormal, and ghosts and spirits, etc. This was largely due, in part, to the fact that I believe my stepfather has some psychic abilities. He always has experiences and always dreams about deceased loved ones. We've had a lot of death in our family, sadly, mostly when I was between the ages of 10 and 20 years old. My stepfather's dad and sister passed away, and both of my grandparents on my father's side passed away. Also, my uncle passed away. My stepsister, Megan, I believe also has some psychic ability. And I believe myself to also be as sensitive to energies, spirits, and a bit of an empath. I pick up on emotions of those around me fairly quickly, and I can scarily sense things that I can't see. I've got a lot of different stories for you regarding myself, my stepfather, and my sister. But this one I'm going to share with you still haunts me to this day, because I simply cannot explain it. I was having my birthday party at my home. I was turning 10 years old. My birthday's in February and in the middle of winter. So my mother took me and a few of my friends to an ice rink so we could ice skate. Then we went back to our house to do cake and presents. My friends and I must have been hopped up on cake and ice cream, so we decided to play a game of tag. Now, to get into my living room, you have to run past my basement door. I'll quickly explain a thing or two about my basement. Firstly, it always terrified me. Now, whether that was down to an overactive imagination or too many Friday night horror films, I don't know. Perhaps it was something genuinely down there. What I do know, though, is that it always just felt wrong. To me, anyway. I always felt constantly like someone was watching me whenever I'd be down there watching movies or playing with my sisters. I always had a sense of unease and a very uncomfortable sense of not being safe whilst I was down there. Like I was not welcome there. That being said, my mother still currently lives in the same house, and I will still not step foot in that basement. So anyway, you have to run past the basement door to get into the living room. We had a couch at that time close to the basement door, sitting along the wall. I'd made a rule that the couch was home free, and if you got to the couch before the person who was it catches you, then you were safe. So I'm running down the hallway to get to my couch, and my basement door was open. My mother was down there doing some laundry. I was barefoot at the time, and as I ran past the basement door, something sharp sliced open the side of my foot. Now, I had a vision in my head of someone laying on their belly against the ceiling of the basement, holding a sharp pointed knife upwards, waiting for someone to run past and injure themselves. When I got to the couch, there was blood all down my foot. I cried for my mother, and she came running upstairs. All of my friends stopped playing and came to the couch to see. My mother rationalized that something had to be on the floor. Something I've stepped on. Maybe I hit it against something as I ran. Well, they searched for a good 20 minutes and could not find a single thing that would explain the cut on my foot. What's more, my mother had vacuumed and cleaned the entire floor before all of my friends arrived. And that is the end of our first dark mini experience. And I must say, the image of somebody almost levitating against the ceiling of a basement, holding a knife through the floorboards, is certainly one that's going to stay with me for quite some time yet. And why I've automatically assumed that person to have the role of a clown, I've no earthly idea. What I will also say is some people have stated they've heard some of these stories and experiences before, and that's highly likely for two reasons. Firstly, many people will share their shorter experiences to many paranormal shows, so you likely could have heard these experiences before. If you're adamant you've heard them from my voice, then that also is possible. Because as I think I covered in the earlier minisodes, I did also host a podcast which I deleted over 200 episodes of. That too was true paranormal experiences. And many of these experiences have been dragged from that ether. The reason being, just because I've deleted the shows does not mean that those people who've submitted the experiences should also have their experiences lost forever. So hopefully that clears things up if you sense an air of familiarity about some of these experiences. But right now, let's have our second and final experience for today's Dark Minisode. Let's take a quick break in today's show to talk to you about Factor. Now, this holiday season, you may be looking for nutritious, convenient meals to keep you energized on these jam-packed days. Factor, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal delivery service, can help you fuel up for breakfast, lunch, dinner, all with chef-prepared, dietitian-approved, ready-to-eat meals delivered straight to your door. You'll save time, you'll eat well, you'll stay on track with your healthy lifestyle, all whilst tackling that holiday to-do list. Factor's fresh, never-frozen meals are ready in just 2 minutes. All you have to do is heat and enjoy. Skip the stress of meal prepping over the holidays with Factor. Choose from over 35 weekly flavor-packed, fresh, never-frozen meals that support a healthy lifestyle and meet your meal preferences. Looking for special occasion meals during the holidays? Well, level up with Gourmet Plus options, prepared to perfection by chefs and ready to eat in record time. Or maybe you want to watch those calories over the holidays. Well, try the dietitian-approved Calorie Smart meals with around or less than 550 calories per serving. Simply choose your meals and enjoy fresh, flavor-packed meals delivered to your door and ready to eat in just 2 minutes. But don't take my word for it. This November, get Factor and get eating well. Head over to factormeals.com/darkparanormal50 and use code darkparanormal50 to get 50% off. That's code darkparanormal50 at factormeals.com/darkparanormal50 and get 50% off. As much as I've been a skeptic my whole life, I've secretly been a little open to the idea of ghosts. Whatever they are, I put this down to my mum's experiences, and the experiences of those on my mum's side of the family. This is a collection, really, of premonition, semi-transparent stone tape occurrences, and seemingly intelligent apparitions. For instance, I remember as a kid going into a family pub-type place with my mum and dad. We sat down near the fireplace and I noticed that my mum had turned very pale, like she was about to vomit. Just as my dad was about to order us all a drink, she suddenly stood up and announced to my dad, "We need to leave right now. This isn't right." A week later, the pub we'd been in had started to have some renovation work, and the local newspaper reported they'd found a human skull literally behind the wall where we'd been sitting. My mum, just like her father, has also had strange premonitions. Like the time she noticed a woman walking down the street and she had a massive urge to run over and tell the lady to be extremely careful today. She didn't do this because she thought how crazy that might seem. Lo and behold, the next day we saw her walking up the street with half of her head bruised in a terrible shade of black and purple, and her eye was swollen. We learned later that day her husband had attacked her. Similarly, our neighbour across the street came over to hand over a parcel that she'd taken in for us. My mum finished talking to her about the weather or something and then came into the house. She later told me, when I was grown up enough to hear this, that while she stood there in the doorway, she had witnessed the neighbour's face caving in on the left-hand side. That same neighbour sadly died very shortly after of a brain tumour on the left-hand side. She must get this sensitivity from my granddad, who was a normal run-of-the-mill type of guy, until he was in a mining explosion. Someone didn't sound the alarm for him to evacuate. Since that day, and after recovering, something previously dormant was activated. For example, he suddenly knew he was going to die at 54. He would rave about this knowledge to the point where my gran would have to leave the room when he started saying such things. He would routinely become frantic and close all the curtains and TV off because they were coming. When my mum was about to give birth to me, she visited my granddad. He was 54. She entered the hospital room where he lay, and he immediately said to her, "Have you not had that kid yet?" "What? My little girl," she replied. "It's not a girl, it's a boy. And when you have him, I'll be dead. I'm on borrowed time as we speak." So, yeah, I was a boy in the end. And my mum stuck to her guns in the name Ashley, even though my gender was not what she expected. I guess her premonition ability wasn't working that day. I was born during a maelstrom of a storm that cut all the power in the hospital on Friday the 13th, 1984. My granddad died at 54. Aside from her witnessing things like Victorian children, sitting by an abandoned railway picking daisies and making chains from them in the middle of a harsh winter, and then not being there when she turned to take a second look, there is one particular story that my gran told my mum that gives me shivers every time. Since my gran, like my mum, is never one to embellish a tale, I take her as a very credible witness. And given that this was a time before the internet, she would have had no idea that what she saw was also seen by countless other people. My gran, Florence, shared a room with her 18-year-old sister, Marion. She was 9 years old at the time when she first started to talk to her parents about the event that had been recurring for her night after night. I've no idea how long this had been going on for before she finally couldn't stand it anymore and bolted from her room to tell her parents. But it went something like this. At around 3 to 4 in the morning, her bedroom door would open. A completely black form would slowly and silently enter the room. My gran would see this form, and she would always dive under the covers until the apparition passed, peeking out only to check it had gone. Unlike the Victorian daisy chain girls which my mum saw, which were most likely a stone tape recording, from what my gran describes, this seemed to be an intelligent being that reacted with its environment. The most common interaction from this entity was that it would walk slowly around the bed until it stood over my grand sister, Marion, who was always sleeping. It would lean down over her, take a moment with its face close to hers, before slowly walking back out of the room. Now, to me, growing up hearing this, my gran's description of this creature always sounded ridiculously over the top. You see, he had a black cloak, a wide-brimmed hat, and glowing red eyes. Nowadays, of course, we all know and refer to him as the Hat Man. One night, this visitation got too much for her, and after the shadow had done its rounds and left, she ran to the safety of her parents' room and told them everything. It was many years later, and a house move later too, that she was informed that previous to them moving into that house, a man had hung himself on the landing just outside their bedroom door. When my gran recounted this story to my mum, she went a little further with her description. She told her to look out for the Sandeman sherry bottle, because he looked just like that. Ashley, thank you so much for such a wonderful series of experiences, and to everyone listening, to spell Sandeman is Sandeman, and then sherry bottle. If you put that into Google and go to images, well, let's just say you can thank me later for the lack of sleep. But how very interesting that we have a pre-internet experience of the alleged Hat Man. Fascinating story, fascinating experience. Thank you so much, Ashley. So that wraps things up for this dark minisode. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, and I will speak to you again on Friday for episode 8 of The Dark Paranormal. Don't forget, you can have early ad-free access to all of our episodes, as well as access to the Dark Bites Patreon-only podcast by heading over to patreon.com/The Dark Paranormal. So stay safe, take care, and I'll speak to you again on Friday for episode 8 of season 13 of The Dark Paranormal.